who looked at Meera. She is a bhakt, she was a devotee. She was totally in love with the Supreme Beloved, Sri Krishna, the form to her. But this was what the Sufi calls the path of annihilation. It's a very important part of um, that way of life. When she calls herself myself, it is of the body, the present day perception. She's looking from a lower level of perception, and over the years she has annihilated her belongings. She's no more the queen of Chittor. She no more has a palace. She no more has a family. She no more has the luxuries of life. It didn't seem to make much difference to her because all she had in her heart was the divine beloved. And in the seeking for the divine beloved, slowly, slowly, all these attributes fell down from her. And as she went on, it slowly meant to her that she was not doing it. What was happening to her was being done by the divine. And at that time, you see that she drops her body itself, the Panchamahabhuta body, the elements, and she moves into the spirit. And the spirit fuses with the divine. So this is the second part of the annihilation. If you remember, I said there are stages in annihilation. The first is the annihilation of action, where you think, I'm doing this, I'm sitting for a class, I'm teaching, I'm listening, I'm going to the lawyer, I'm going to the doctor, I've got COVID. All this we keep saying because we are identifying with the physical body. The physical body is here partly to fulfill certain karmas that it started earlier on, and partly to learn that the body itself is to be an instrument for the mind, and the mind has to be an instrument for the soul, and the soul is the instrument of the divine. So whenever this idea comes to you, even if it's just for a minute, that I am an instrument, Lord, it is you who is doing this through me. You make me sad. You make me happy. See, she says, "Main prem divani hu, I'm mad with love, but I'm not able to stop it. I can't help it. If I knew this was what it was going to be, I would have said, don't have love in your life." You know, this is the despairing soul, the mind that is crying out. But then she can't help it because the minute you think you are the instrument of the divine has already come and given you the grace and accepted your surrender. However incomplete that surrender is. That's what you have to remember. You don't have to go till the very end of your path to surrender. As and when you feel that it is he who's doing this, supposing I'm going to the railway station and there is an accident there, and I happen to get stuck at a traffic jam and I'm annoyed because I'll miss my train. When I go to the station, I realize that it was a good thing I didn't go. Then I would say, that God helped me by doing this. So whatever you see as a difficulty, as a problem, offer it to the divine. It is all his doing. By wishing or by thinking that we are doing something, we cannot even move the air in our lungs. You can't breathe in or breathe out unless that prana is sent to you. And no matter what you do to get rid of that prana until your time comes and he decides, you cannot get rid of it also. So this is the way of changing a lower perception to a higher perception. And the Sufis will say, when you go on as an abhyasa, doing this continuously, and then they have other techniques also, like every religion has a technique. And here it is called the itlak. And with time and patience on this path, all intellectual questions will be answered. And what you think is contradiction will merge into one. So there will be no confusion about logical questions. The breathing will change, that change of breathing is called zikr. And eating habits will change. You start eating less and less. If you remember Jesus, when he was in the wilderness, the Satan tempted him and said, 45 days he was there. He said, you're hungry and you have miracles with you, siddhis. If you can change these, your father can change these stones to bread, why don't you eat? Such a simple thing. But he said, man does not live by bread alone. He lives out of every word that proceeds from the mouth of the divine. Every word is what? Not a word as we think of it. It means every vibration. When the divine vibrates with creation, you get the prana. So long as he vibrates for this form that you have today, you will be alive in this form. When he vibrates in a different way, this form will change into another form. Now, we usually think that we are the same form, human bodies, but if you actually look at it like a scientist, you came as an embryo, then you were a baby, then you were an infant, and this is so superficial. And then you're an adult, and then you become an old person, and then you shrivel, the body gives up, and then it falls by the wayside. The house is, you finish living in that house and you're moving on. So you see, death doesn't come, the physical death doesn't come only at the time that you call it a dying. The death is constantly happening from the time we are born. And when we understand that, and when we ask ourselves, and what is it that is constantly alive? Because something is there. Then we say we are searching for it. And when you search for it, then you feel sorry that you didn't begin the search earlier. I feel it. So, that is what they say is a spiritual suffering, the remorse. Beet gaye din bhajan binare. That's what Kabir Das says. Kabir was a Sufi too. So when your perception changes at the moment of death, which is your physical body, then you start having a different sort of perception where you see the whole body and many other bodies around you as particles, all together moving in and out without any understanding that you have. So supposing you're drawn to a person, the particles in your body move out to that person. When you're repelling somebody, the particles of your body come back or go to the side. And this is happening all the time. You only see it at the moment of death. Now, supposing you are a spiritual seeker and God has taken you by the hand and you get the benefit, the punya or the good fortune of having a guru who tells you this is what it's all about. You are the spirit, you are not the body. Then, like Jesus, you can also be crucified on Friday and rise up on Sunday and say, I never said I was the body. You see, now, supposing you can do that, and the Sufi says, and every religion says this, Christianity, Hinduism, Jainism, any religion you take, it will tell you, go to the essence and hold on to the essence. Once you hold the essence, you realize that this physical body that you identify yourself with is not really the whole of, it's only one portion of who you really are. You are part of the essence, and that is spirit. And from this body, you move on to seeing everything and everybody around you like particles that are in movement. Then you don't know where you end and where the other person begins. So if you are hitting somebody next to you and you see the whole thing in a particle way, you'll feel the pain because you'll know that you're hitting yourself, your particles that have moved to that person. So that is why it's necessary in the spiritual world to carry love with you wherever you go. Whether they never said like somebody. You may like someone, you may not like someone. That's different. The particles, your vibrations may not sync with their vibrations. But you can love even the people you do not like. How do you love? By allowing that deeper and higher nature, divinity within you to move out and embrace the person that you physically are not very happy about. So they say it's only when you do this sort of thing, then you experience the truth. And when you experience it, you cannot really talk about it, because even now, when I'm telling you, when you will experience the particles, I cannot explain to you how much of love will flow through you. And that is what Meera is saying. Eri mein to prem divani. I am mad with love, not her love, the love that comes from the essence. So you can't say, it's not like saying, I love so and so, or, I love you, or I love ice cream, I love that car, I love that necklace. That is a Pancha Mahabhuta love. But when you're talking of love here at the Sufi level, we are talking about the divine love that is our nature, which has been hidden by our um, identifying with the Pancha Mahabhutas. So let me give you two more stories, and then I'll come to one or two little practices that are done. You have, first of all, the story of the Prophet himself. The Prophet himself, in the early days, he was called Al-Amin, or the compassionate, the wise man. Why wise? Because on one occasion, when people were rebuilding the Kaaba, they had the Kaaba down, and the various tribes in Mecca wanted to put it up, and each tribe felt that if that tribe put it up, they get more privileges and they'll be looked up with respect. So there was a bit of a quarrel for who will actually put up uh, this cube. So then at that time, the Prophet came in. He was a young man that time. He hadn't gone through all this. And they said, now come on, tell us what we can do so that we can all stop fighting and put it up. So getting to understand what they were fighting about, he said, place the Kaaba on a cloth, a big cloth. And then he asked each person from the tribe to hold one corner, different tribes to hold a corner each, and to lift it. So then, when so many people lifted it and put it up, nobody could say that I am prominent. I'm the only one who did this. So this was considered a very wise move, and I don't see why people can't use some of these methods that people of that level have talked about. So this was his samskara as he um, started his life itself. Now, what he did was he would go to like any of the people of that time, he would go to the Mount Hira for meditation. And one of these times of meditation, he would go, his wife would sit outside and wait for him to come out. That was Khadija. And when that happened, he had suddenly he felt a light around him. And this light was very, very bright. He could not face it. Whichever side he turned, the light was there. And the light said to him, Ikra, that is, recite. And he was afraid because he had never had any experience like this in his life before. He was almost panic stricken. The whole body, all his joints were in severe pain. Remember when I told you about the annihilation of action? And it said recite. And what is it to mean? That I am doing it and you are just an instrument. But he didn't understand then. So this is what is called in Chandi Pat, you'll see about the mother, Ati Saumya Ati Raudrayai. The most beautiful and tender, and at the same time the most terrifying and fearsome aspect of the divine. It is called the Kadosh, and it's called the terrifying otherness of God. As we are all thinking, life is going to be so beautiful, and then we are going to get into a rose garden, and somebody is going to bathe us in perfume and give us what we love to eat. This is heaven. No, the kingdom of heaven is within us. And before we reach that kingdom of heaven, we have to earn it with certain qualities. We have to get rid of the rajas and tamas and move into a sattva level. And to move into a sattva level can be pretty painful at times. We have to give up a lot of what we think are necessities, terrible needs, but eventually many of them are really um, comforts, luxuries that we've got used to. So this that light said to him, recite. And the prophet said, I'm not a reciter, because reciters were not looked upon with very great impression in that land, because they knew that if you go into a psychic trance, you can be a prophetic oracle. But that's not what he wanted to be. He wanted to be spiritual. So it is said that this being of light called Jibreel squeezed him, and there was a fair amount of light, visions, bell ringing, repulsion, and fascination. This is what we find when the Kundalini wakes up also. So he suddenly found himself reciting. He didn't know from where the words came. It was a true instrument. And this true instrument started reciting, and that was the Quran that is today. So any amount of translating it or interpreting the Quran will not give you, just as translating the Veda or Upanishad will not give us the quality that we are actually looking for, because the quality is in the vibrations. And the same thing with the Guru also. So he found himself reciting it, and that night the entire Quran descended into him, into his spiritual heart. But it was revealed only over the next 23 years. It came in a vertical descent, slowly, slowly, to be transmitted, say, horizontally. Now, there was a time when, after this, he was very afraid of what had happened to him when he came back to a clear consciousness. And he then told Khadija this has happened, and he told only 2 or 3 other people. One was Baraka, and was Ali. Ali was his cousin, and who would be his successor on the Sufi path, if you want to call it a successor. And then he tells them, and one day he he's in a half sleep, and then he has a night journey that's called the Isra, and it's like in a half sleep between waking and sleeping. He had this vision of Jibreel, that is like what the Christian religion is called. Gabriel is called Jibreel, and Jibreel told him to mount a strange animal, which was like a horse but with a female head and a peacock feather tail. These are the tattvas, and this is the Anahat chakra that he had risen up to, and it took him on a horizontal journey to Jerusalem. Remember, Jerusalem, Mecca, these were all parts of the Arab world at that time. So from Jerusalem, he made a vertical ascent. That is, he moved into the spirit. His physical body was not there. The annihilation happened. And this is what is called the dark night of the soul, because you're not used to that perception. But he withstood it, because when you get something like that happening, you have the power to withstand it also. That is what the divine gives to you. So he went and he came back, and he came back into a purified physical body. And it is this purified physical body that then went about teaching, just like Jesus went about teaching for 3 years after he had gone through a process of complete chitta shuddhi and a purified body, which could hold the power and the energy of the divine. So then there are 3 elements in the recorded statements of Muhammad, that is called the hadith, and you have three elements, the Iman, Islam, and Ihsan. Iman is the faith. What uh, in uh, in Vedanta you call the Mahavishwasa. You have such an unflinching faith that no matter what happens, you will not let go your trust in God. If you remember, Swami Satyananda has written somewhere, and at one time I even spoke about it. It's been a great inspiration to me. And he says, even if the person closest to you, nearest to you betrays it, don't lose your faith in God. You've seen people sometimes they'll say, my my whole stocks and shares fell. I had nothing. You remember in Gujarat, they once had an earthquake, and the people who were very, very wealthy, huge houses, was razed to the ground. Now, it's in such crisis, they are saying, in a major crisis, don't give up your faith. You trust that He has something in that for you. And the greater the difficulty, the greater will be the path that is shown to you. So one day they say that once uh, um, the prophet was sitting with a few people, and a man with clothes which was very, very white, hair was very black, came and sat knee to knee opposite Muhammad, the prophet. He placed his palms of his hands on the prophet's thighs, and he questioned him because the word Islam was brought in by the prophet. Tell me, what is Islam? He asked. So the prophet said, it means surrender. How do you show your surrender? He said, praying 5 times, salat, zakat, fasting during Ramadan, Hajj, the pilgrimage to Kaaba, wherever you are, if you can afford it, Shahada, that is your testimony of faith, to say, I do believe, la ilaha illallah. So that bit to say that I do believe in that God. Now, it doesn't mean that is the only God. There is only one God. This is the name I give him. That's what they are saying. And then believe in that God, that no good or evil comes to you by him, by yourself, except by his providence. Trust that he will give you the good, he will give you the difficulty so that you can progress towards him. What does a child do when the father says, sit inside the house, don't step out, there will be vehicles coming, there will be beggars on the road. And this little child, 2 years, says, Papa's gone inside, let me just go and peep out the door and see what's happening. He goes out, steps outside um, the front door, which is kept open, and he sees a man coming with ringing bells and coming asking for alms. The child has never seen anything like this. A scooter whizzes past. Child is scared. Where does he run? He runs straight inside. He says, Mama, Mama, Papa, Papa. So that is what they say, that worship God as if you have seen him. Because if you don't see him, he sees you. This is what the prophet said. So long as he sees you, you don't have to worry. So having said this, that stranger went away, and the prophet asked the later caliph called Umar, he said, do you know who that questioner was? And Umar said in his humility, he said, only Allah and his prophet know best, but I don't know who it is. So the prophet tells him, this was Jibreel, and he came to teach you your religion. So you say, Islam is the religion of learning to surrender before the divine. Now, even this prayer itself, we said we'll talk about prayer a little. You do the salat 5 times the prayer, preceded by washing the whole body. Why do you wash the whole body? A place of prayer must be clean. The place of prayer is not the church, the mosque, that is also there. But the place of prayer is in your heart. And your whole body has to be clean. And that is what they do when they wash the whole body. And then they do certain postures, 7 postures. Now, many of you here do the Surya Namaskar. What do? The Surya Namaskar? You keep your Anjali Mudra together. Then you put your hand up, then you bend down. It's very similar to that. And what do? We say Om Mitraya Namaha, Om Pram up, Anjali Mudra, Om Preem up, Om Prum down. It is a technique, but you know how they do it? These are very important, and this is how we are meant to be doing it too. These postures are stages of the spiritual journey. When you say sakat, it means to purify and to increase. So how do you first purify your body? When you are standing with your hands in Anjali Mudra, or you are putting your hands up with, you are not, it's Qiyam, it's called, you're not just putting it as a PT exercise. It's not a physical training exercise. You are standing there with wonder and adoration. Oh my God, this whole universe has been created by this tremendous power. You know, that is the amazement that you're looking at. And every morning is a wonder when you see the sun rising. Just step out of the house and look at the sun rising and the trees and the plants and the birds coming to life. This is what they do with wonder and adoration. Then they bow, kuku. And what is the bowing means? It's bowing, having seen this mercy and wonder of the divine, you bow in the face of such majesty. You realize that I am nowhere and I'm not here, but for His grace, I wouldn't be here also. But He has given me the privilege of looking at the wonder that He is. So I'm standing in amazement, then I'm bending down with humility, and then I'm prostrating myself, sajda. What does prostration mean? When you do the prostration in Surya Namaskar, disappear from existence. You go down as if you are part of the earth. You don't belong. This is the annihilation of the physical body. He alone is. I'm not there. That is what the practice is. And then it's a sensory experience. And with that posture, when you go right down, you bow down in Shashankasana, and then you go flat. Ashtangasana, then what happens? Your face is on the ground. So it represents your inner awareness, moving from the outer world and seeing all that the divine is outside, and then bending down in humility, and highlighting yourself as you know yourself, this body, this physical body, thin, fat, black, white, supple, crippled. All this goes, and you are the inner awareness. And with the inner awareness, you rise up again with a different spiritual perception of the divine. So when you do the Surya Namaskar next time, do it with this attitude, not seeing it as just steps to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No. These are your own stages. You have to pass through these stages of standing in wonder at the divine. It is not just trees and plants and malls and what have you, or even ashrams. You have to look at the wonder, the amazement that even before you are born, before we are born, God has already prepared the mother and prepared the milk in the mother to feed you before you are born. So imagine when before you ask to buy something in a mall, or you go to a eatery and are asking for pizza, the pizza is already there. It has been kept waiting for you. Your grains are in your house waiting for you because He has made everything ready for you. Look at that in wonder. So do it with that attitude towards the divine. And then you have the um, going to on Ramadan fast. And the Ramadan fast has many things that we need to understand. We need to understand that Swami Satyananda used to say that if you give up one meal a day, somebody poor and hungry will be nourished with that food that you give up. And Jesus said the same thing, when you give somebody bread, you're feeding me. Remember that? And then when there is abstinence from food, you are not supposed to just stay away from food and have a jolly good time on the phone with somebody or watch movies. It means that you are abstaining from drinking, smoking, all other entertainment from dawn to dusk, and placing, it's like a vrata, a fast. All your attention should be on the divine, not think, oh my God, I wish I hadn't fasted today. I could have had that ice cream the next house has. No, you have to build up, and always before Diksha, Swami Satyanand used to say, don't eat anything this morning. That sort of thing. So, no mentally, no gossip, no fantasy, no fears. You are ready for an initiation because you are all ready to receive the Spirit. When you are like that, then the divine comes to you. The divine is always in you. It's not that it's not there, but you feel the presence of that.
You don't want to listen, huh?
No, you don't want to? Yes? Somebody asked a question.
I have to put it on my phone.
Okay, it's someone else. Okay. So, so then you go to if you can go to the Hajj once a year, or anytime, at least once in your lifetime, if you can afford it, then you go through the various processes in the Hajj itself. Where you go, you stand at a distance in Gram. You wear the dress which is not stitched. Stitching, that is there in every other religion also. It's a consecration. That is, it is an outward sign of individuality. This dress that we wear. A woman may wear a salwar kameez, a man may wear a pant and shirt. But when you go there, all men will dress alike with just a dhoti and a top, two cloths. And sometimes Swamiji also used to give these cloths to friends who are from the Islamic community. And then circumambulate 7 times the Kaaba. It's for of the 7 dimensions of consciousness. And then you pass 7 times between 2 hills, Safa and Marwa. That is, it symbolizes caution and hope. Why caution and hope? Because at one time, Ishmael, who was the forefather of the Prophet, was one of the sons of Ibrahim. The other one was Isaac. When he and his mother went into the desert, and the boy was dehydrated, no food, and he fainted, and she put her head to the ground and she prayed to the divine. She said, you said you would protect my child, and here he is dying of thirst. And a spring sprang up. And she ran 7 times up and down to give him that water, because she only had the hand. And when his thirst was quenched and his hydration was back, she went back to that spring and she said, Zamzam. Zamzam means enough, enough. She said that spring is still there, and people come back with that Zamzam because it is that the Vishwasa, that the faith she had, the unflinching trust that she had, was answered by the divine. So people will bring that back. It is like the Ganga is to the Hindus and Galilee is to the Christians, that sort of thing. It is associated with hope and the answer from the divine. Then people stand in prayers beneath the slopes of the Mount Arafat, that is receptive to knowledge. So then there are other processes like this. I'm not going more into all these processes. All that I'm saying is that whatever process you do, don't think of it as just a technique and don't just feel satisfied. Whichever faith you belong to, it's the same God all of us worship. And these processes are constantly to remind us and inspire us to keep living a spiritual life. Don't give up your search for the truth. That is what is being said. Don't get sidetracked. So there is a joke here that the devil and his friend, they were out for a walk. A man picks up, that friend picks up something from the road with great happiness. So some other man, not this devil's friend. So what did he pick up? Asks the devil's friend. And the devil says a bit of the truth. So the devil's friend asked the devil, aren't you concerned? The devil said, no, don't worry. I'll get him to make a belief out of it. So when you make a belief out of something, you lose the value system. Don't hang on to belief and doubt. Go to straight to Shraddha, faith. Faith and trust is very different from belief and doubt. Put the whole of yourself there and then see what God has to say. Now just a few, what's the time? We have time? I suppose we have. We'll go on and let's see when it stops. So I wanted to give you two stories about Sufi people. You have the story of Hasrat Rabia Basiri. Rabia was a female Sufi. And at a time when there were not many female Sufis, or if they were there, they were unknown. She was like Meera. She had only one need and one love, to immerse herself in the love of God. So in her prayer, she says, "Oh God, if I worship you for fear of hell, burn me in hell. And if I worship you in hope of paradise, exclude me from paradise. But if I worship you for your own sake, grudge me not your everlasting beauty." She's talking of unconditional, selfless love. She's not there because she's afraid that she'll have a bad time. She's not there because he's going to give her some reward. So it's a much higher sort of love when you say, I love you for your own sake, than to say, I'm getting so much reward in heaven I'll have this, and in heaven I'll have that. Or if I don't follow the path in hell, I'll suffer from this, I'll suffer from that. Those are qualities that are given to us to remember what we do when we lose out on something very special. And they are true also, because your heaven and your hell, when you say heaven is within you, so is hell for that matter. So she was born in the 8th century and she lived in Iraq. She didn't write any books. She didn't write anything at all, hardly. But there were people who were living in the time that she was there. So there was one Hasrat Attar. He said she wasn't a single woman about her, he said, but she was 100 men over, robed in the quintessence of pain, from foot to face, immersed in the truth, effaced in the radiance of God, and liberated from all superfluous excess. So you see this quality of love that they have, that a bhakta has. It is that sort of love which flows out of them to the whole of creation, doing good, because it's a love of the divine. But at the same time, they go through a tremendous pain because of their identifying with the bodies of the other people who are suffering, which is also a necessity. One has to go through anguish and pain of viraha bhakti, like the word understand, separation from the divine. So she was a Qalandar of Islam, and she had overcome her lower selves. That's called the nafs, the tamasic part of her, through devotion, meditation, patience, and tawakkul, that is trust in God. She was constantly absorbed in the thought of God and had reached the height of the mystic path, Hinafila. So more than that was the concept of divine love that she reaffirmed. She introduced the idea that God could be loved for God's own sake and not out of fear. And she taught that repentance was also remorse. Was, if you remember, St. John used to say, repent because the Messiah is coming. What they mean by repent is not to feel guilty and miserable and go on, what do you say, meditating on the suffering that you are going through and why you caused it and what happened, and making a production of it. What they say is, you repentance was God already accepted her and he gave her the gift of repentance. When you love somebody and you meet them and you think to yourself, I wish I had met this person 10 years ago. What a lot of time I wasted. It is that sort of remorse that makes you go into a state where you know that even if your body is, even if you're going to take another body and come back, you will never make this mistake again. So this is Rabia. And personally, I'm very fond of Rabia because there is a story that most of you know, I've said it many times, that she was so high in her mystical state that the angels mean your higher qualities, tell her, just like Jesus was tempted by bread, by the stones, she is told that you ask for any boon that you wish, any desire, because you have earned it, your love has earned it. And she says, I've got my divine beloved, what more do I need? I can't ask for anything else, I don't want anything else. Then the angels tell her, then we will give you something, because we have to reaffirm to other people that bhakti has a certain reward. So they say, wherever you walk, when your shadow falls on somebody, if that person is ill, he will become well. If that person is dead, he will rise. That is the power of your shadow itself. So then Rabia said, I hadn't asked for a boon. You gave it to me. Now can I ask for a boon? And the angel say, okay, now you ask whatever you want. She said, give me a stiff neck so I don't turn around and see it happening. So you see, this is what bhakti is all about. You and your divine beloved, and no need to take credit, no need to think, wow, I've reached somewhere, I'm the closest. No, you see it from a completely different perception altogether. So this is one story. These little stories will always give you insights into what prayer is all about, because prayer is not necessarily kneeling or sitting or going to a temple or church or masjid and sitting and doing a few exercises, then coming out and then being the same old lazy person or crook or so comfortable with life that you don't think about somebody else. So that doesn't help. What they're telling you is that a prayer is something that goes through every cell of your being. You are transformed. You're not changed. There's a difference between change and transformation. When you change, you're changing from A to B. In transformation, you're moving vertically. It's a quantum leap. You're going to a completely different dimension. So then there was another Sufi master called Ibrahim Ben Adam. This Kalandar was sitting in a forest, and two wandering dervishes, dervish is the name of Kalandar seekers, approached him. He asked them to come. They sat and they talked about spiritual matters till it was evening. And when it was night, Ibrahim told them, why don't you stay for dinner? Mind you, they were all sitting in a forest. So they said, okay. Immediately they said, okay, a table of the finest foods appeared. And these two dervishes were very, very surprised because they are seekers. They've never seen anything like this. So they said, how long have you been a dervish? They asked Ibrahim. And Ibrahim said, 2 years. Then one of them says, I have been following the Sufi path for 3 decades. And no such skill has manifested itself to me. You see what he's saying? He's thinking of it as a skill. Ibrahim didn't say anything. When food was almost finished, a stranger in green came and shared the food. everybody realized it was the inner guide, the guru, who's called the Kid, immortal guide of all Sufis. And when he stood up to leave, he said, "You do wonder about Ibrahim, isn't it? But what have you renounced to follow the path of the Sufi? You gave up your expectations of security and an ordinary life. Ibrahim was a mighty king. He threw away the sovereignty of the Sultanate of Balak to become a Sufi. This is why he is ahead of you." He just gave up. And not only that, during the 30 years, you gained satisfaction through renunciation itself. I am a sannyasi, I've renounced. This is your payment. But he has always abstained from claiming any payment for sacrifice. You see, they didn't even know this was Ibrahim. So the religion or spirituality at the roots is not a change of outlook. It's a radical change of vision. If you say that I'm growing, it means the past is existing in you. You are growing better and better, but the past is still there. Here, it is discontinuity with the past. It's a quantum leap. So to know the story of Ibrahim, he was a great king and he had a tremendous responsibility. Now, when you have a lot of responsibility, you are terribly worried. Why? Because when you have responsibility, if I had responsibility, I would say, I have the responsibility. It's so difficult to handle people. It is, how do I handle the stress of it? All this is happening because I think I am handling it. Now, supposing I say that I have surrendered to the divine, he let him act through me, good or bad, he knows what to do. So then I don't have to be in stress. So it's a complete quantum leap. And then when he was sleeping, he was lying there and thinking about all this in his mind. Suddenly, he heard someone walk on the roof of the palace. It was midnight, and this man who was walking laughed. So the king was sort of like shaken because nobody walks on top of a palace roof so casually. He couldn't see him, of course. He heard the footsteps. "Who are you?" he said. "What are you doing?" The man said, "I'm looking for my camel on the roof." Then the king thought he must be a madman. Can you find any camel walking on a roof? He tried to catch him. The man disappeared. And the king was very bothered about this, thinking about this, because it's one of his responsibilities, you see. So the next day when he was in court, he heard some voice at the gate. And there was a quarrel between the sentry and this person. This person was saying loudly, "I want to stay in the Sarai." Sarai means like a guest house, a tourist, a hotel. "I want to stay in this hotel," he said. The guard said, "This is not a Sarai, this is a palace." Then the man said, "Don't be a fool, it is a Sarai, it is a guest house." So the king calls the man because he sort of recognizes the voice. And he said to him, "I know you were on the roof last night, but now I want to know, why do you call this a guest house? This is my palace," he said. So the man laughs and he said, "Long ago I had come here and another man said that he owned it." So the king said, "That was my father." And he said, "Before that also I had come and yet another man said he owned the palace." So he said, "That was my grandfather." Then the man says, "Each time I came, there was a new man claiming. So how can this palace belong to anybody?" Now, the king looked at the man. He was clothed in tatters. His face was very luminous. And he thought to himself, "This man with all his tattered clothes is more of an emperor than I am." He fell at the feet of the beggar and he said, "Once I understand this is a Sarai, I'm leaving to find my home." That moment, Ibrahim renounced and he never looked back. That is what Jesus says, when you put your hands on the plow, don't look back. Rabia says, don't look back. Don't look back, meaning don't look and say, "Oh, I could have been like this. Why didn't I do this? Why did I come this far? The Swamiji has given me so many difficulties. If I had known, I would not have got into this." You can't change it because the divine has accepted you. The divine has made you move in that direction and you cannot go back because that is the divine's will. You are his child and he holds you. So when you have such an existential moment, the inner guru is awakened. So now what is an existential moment? It doesn't suddenly happen out of the blue. You have been seeking it long, and now when you see, sometimes I tell people don't send too many WhatsApp messages about guru said this, guru said that, because if you go on doing it, the brain is continuously watching it and you take it for granted. Sometimes you are very overwhelmed, but most often you take it for granted because you say this day in and day out. You know, there's some घर की मुर्गी दाल बराबर. That is, and you know what you see around you, you're so familiar with, you take it for granted. You don't see the majesty in it. Your perception itself becomes lazy because the brain cells act in that way. How many times have you passed a bird sitting on the tree and making a sound and looking at it in wonder? Because did you ever think, I cannot fly with wings with all my brilliance, but that bird can. It has something that I don't have. I have a limitation. Have you ever looked at a flower growing quietly by the wayside without a curriculum vitae in its hand, that I blossom before the governor of the state? So when we look at other things also, realize that when you see everything constantly, familiarity creeps in. That is the way of the brain. Even smells. If you live next to a sewer, the first time you go, you screw up your nose. But if you live there, look at the slums in different places with the sewage running behind. You live so long that your nose cuts off the smell. It has got used to it. Familiarity cuts off what you can see. So it becomes a habit, and it's like, eating something wonderful every day, and you find you get so bored with it, you want something different. But to go on this path, you need guts and intelligence. We have to remember always, and that is what Ishavasya Upanishad says, Ishavasyam idam sarvam yat kincha jagatyam jagat tena tyaktena bhunjita magveda prasyasvidam. Everything in this universe, including you, belong to the divine. The divine is not a person with a beard or not a beard or a handsome man standing there. No, the divine is consciousness with great amount of mercy and love. And it is when you renounce, you're not renouncing the world. So if you say, okay, I left all this and I went off to Himalayas and such, no big deal. Many people do that. If you say that, I've been standing on one leg for 20 minutes is a great achievement, nothing there also, because gymnasts do it, people in the circus do it. If you look at some of the trapeze items, you would see such wonderful things that they do. It doesn't necessarily make you spiritual. So renunciation is renouncing the world that the ego creates. Please remember this. When you renounce, you're not renouncing the world as it is, because it doesn't belong to you, that world. It belongs to him. You are renouncing the world that your ego creates. So this is my house, this is my place, this is my country. You can't get out of the world. Wherever you are, it becomes your world. So Ibrahim was a person who never ever talked about his renunciation. You'll see this in many people. Swamiji also, Swami Guru Swami Satyanandaji. I don't remember him sitting and going on talking about his family or everyone and what happened and all that sort of situation. Sannyasis, this is called the Purvashrama, what they were before. It is no more. They've left it and it's gone. Once renounced, it's finished. It was like a dream. So if you are silent, honest, and sincere, you will find that kid in Sufi life, your inherent guide. It is not an outer phenomenon. It is your own inner self, small voice speaking, but you may hear it from outside through somebody else. So when the inner voice first speaks to you, it seems as if it's the outer. The outer master is like a catalytic agent in whose presence, because they have reached something, something is triggered within us, and slowly um, the master takes possession of you. Slowly, there is a synchronicity between Guru and the disciple. And when the voice of the master is in your voice, then you are in tune with the inner master. And that inner master is what Sufis call Khidr. So spirituality is a deep letting go. It's a trust. There is a story that Ibrahim, once he surrendered and he was walking somewhere and he slipped into a river. And people who saw him asked, do you know swimming? Otherwise we'll come to help you. Nobody thought of jumping in the water, and anyway, what does it cost you to jump? So Ibrahim says, wait, I too am waiting. If he wants, he will save me. If he doesn't want, who am I to save myself? So this is what they say, Pana, disappearing. Let God be. You don't say, I am here. I'm going to tell him what we need, what I need. So there was yet another story I wanted to tell you. But, about Rabia. She said once somebody came to see her. One person went to visit Rabia. He found her in her home. She had only a partly broken jug which she used for wudu, for the ablution, cleaning, and drinking water. An old straw mat on which she slept, and the brick which we used as pillow. Now, if you had a team of research people coming from a wealthy place, what would they say? Undeveloped place, right? Underdeveloped, sorry, not underdeveloped. So this man says to her, I have many affluent friends. Shall I ask them to bring some items for you? I have wealthy friends. They can get you a good mattress on which you can sleep. So Rabia said, O Malik, that is this man's name, is my provider your provider and the provider of the wealthy not the same being? So Malik said, yes. Then she said, what? Has he forgotten about the needs of the poor because of their poverty, while he remembers the needs of the wealthy? This Malik said, no, that's not so. Then Rabia said, when he never forgets anyone, why should we remind him? He has wished this condition for me, and I'm pleased because it is his pleasure. So you see, that is the attitude of a true Sufi, and that is the attitude of any true bhakta, no matter what the religion, what the community. Because how many more minutes do we have? Can someone tell me the time now?
Swamiji, we have another half an hour.
Half an hour. Oh, good. So I can tell you some Mullah Nasruddin stories too, which I hadn't talked about for some time. Now, nobody knew where the Mullah Nasruddin was born, where he came from, who was he, and what was his background. It was an invention by the Sufis, so that nothing has quite been as good as the invention of Mullah Nasruddin, because it makes you stop for a moment when certain situations are made clear. Thinking outside the box, it's called, or lateral thinking, breaking boundaries, getting receptive to the unpredictable. Never take anything for granted. So, just remember, a Nasruddin story doesn't give enlightenment. It's a bridge between ordinary life and a transformation of consciousness, which nothing else can give you. So here is one story. I don't know if I said it on the first day. patterned thinking cannot be applied to the truth, which moves in a different dimension. We have a pattern of thinking, right? If it's warm today, it's going to rain. And if it's rain, the place is going to cool off. Or if you see a friend coming this way, oh, I know him. He must be coming because his wife has cooked a good dish. He's coming to share it. If a letter comes from the ashram, it must be prasad, because this is our patterns of thinking. So the mullah was walking along an alley one day. And as he was walking, those are narrow alleys and you have houses on both sides. A man from the roof fell down, landed on Nasruddin. The other man was unhurt, but Mullah Nasruddin was taken to the hospital. So a disciple asked him, what lesson did you learn from this master? So Mullah said, to avoid belief in inevitability, that such and such a thing has to happen. He says, give up your theoretical questions. For example, if a man falls off a roof, will his neck be broken? It will, usually. That is our program thinking. But then Mullah says, I gave that up because he fell from the roof, but it is my neck that is broken because he fell on Mullah, you see. So, on the average, people think in patterns and cannot accommodate to different points of view. That is why we lose a great deal of meaning in life. We lose out on the love of other people. We lose out on peace and friendship in the whole world because of our perceptions of what life ought to be like, and therefore it is like that. And what should I do to counter it? So one evening, Mullah said he was a smuggler. He used to take his donkey with big loads of straw and come back trudging. So the border security would search him every day, and they would sift the straw, put it in the water, even burnt it. Nothing was found. But meanwhile, he got richer and richer. When he retired and went to another country, when he was older, he met his old customs officer. And this man said to him, now you can tell me, Mullah, what did you smuggle? We could never catch you out. Mullah said, I smuggled donkeys. The moral here is that the paranormal is nearer to us than we realize. We always feel that, because we are ignorant, something transcendental must be far off, complicated. Somebody has to give us a technique and somebody will have to reveal it to us. It's a Maharahasya. So there are these things that one has to remember. It's not like that. It is just exactly as the Prophet says, Allah is nearer to you than your jugular vein from the Quran. And Christ says, I am closer to you than your own breath. And Krishna says, I am within you. They are not each of them saying for themselves. They are talking about the divine in them that is speaking through them because they have reached that point and giving you a message in the only way you and I will understand. Then I've talked about the man losing his key. I'm sure all of you know it. So here was a kinsman who came to see Nasruddin from the countryside, bringing a duck as a gift. Nasruddin was delighted. He cooked and shared it with the guest. Soon many people from the village kept visiting him, saying they were a friend of the man who brought the duck. They didn't bring anything. They would come because they'd stop. They say, hey, let's go look up Mullah. He gives a good meal. So they came for the meal. And he would very willingly serve them also. And one day he was exasperated. So one day when a man came and told him, I'm the friend of a friend of a friend of the relative who brought you the duck. He sat down to rest, expecting a meal. And Mullah gave him a bowl of hot water. And this man said, what is this? He said, this is the soup of the soup of the soup of the duck my relative brought. So Sufis are very sharply perceptive. And if you are a teacher from some other school, and you don't know the Sufi is sitting in front of you, and you try to say, you know, I do this, I do that, I'm teaching yoga in the water, I'm teaching of standing on my head and walking to school that way and all that. They look at you and they realize that this man is caught up with the world of illusions. He's so proud of the world of illusions, he is not receptive to the truth. So that man moves away and we lose out on the truth. So there is another story when he went to a large house, Mullah Nasruddin, to collect money for charity. Hajj was coming. Then the servant in that house, huge bungalow, he said, my master is out. So Mullah Nasruddin stopped for a minute. Then he said, okay, even though your master did not contribute, can you please give him a piece of advice from me? So the servant said, yes, sir. Tell him next time you go out, don't leave your face at the window. Somebody might steal it. So I'm giving you these little stories to see how, to tell you how people become so very clear in their perception, and because they are not tied up by the external conditioning, and because of the conditioning, they don't lose out on a lot of the truth because the head is filled with a whole lot of inappropriate and irrelevant stuff. So this is by and large. Let me tell you a little about the people who have moved into the second level of annihilation of attributes. First is the annihilation of action. When you realize it is the divine who's doing everything and you are just an instrument, then you give up your stress and your fear and your worry and everything, and you're moving into a second dimension, which also will have to come to an end. And that second dimension is where you give up all your attributes, the gunas. Even that goes away, because out of identifying with a physical body, you start identifying with the world of matter, particles. And when you see the potentiality, the world of potential in those particles, they can move anywhere and become anything. Then that person gets a siddhi of occult objects. And this is the way I had the other day, I had put a picture, I didn't tell you about it, Deepankara Buddha, and a man bowing before him. The story of the Buddha, the Gautama Buddha, who many eons ago was a young man called Sumedha, and he met a girl called Sumita, going along with all the other people in the village, taking some lotuses to a Buddha. There have been many Buddhas. And she says, I'm going to see Deepankara Buddha. He says, can I come with you? She says, okay. So they go together because they are talking and coming. They are late and they are standing at the back. So everybody who is in front places a lotus at the feet of the Deepankara Buddha. People at the back throw the lotuses. So this Sumedha asks Sumita, can I borrow one of your lotuses? So she gives him the lotus and she says, you can have all of them, because the minute I saw you, I have given myself to you. That's the picture. So you'll see the boy who is in front and the girl on the side bowing. And Deepankara Buddha said, who threw this lotus? And then the crowd makes way for him to go to the front, followed with Sumita. And this Deepankara Buddha says, you will be a Buddha one day. And she will be your companion through your many births, helping you and supporting you to reach that point. So Sometimes people say, how could Gautama Buddha, this boy that is kneeling in front, become Siddhartha after many lifetimes? And she comes in his lifetime, in those lifetimes, in many, many different ways, mother, sister, friend, enemy, always supportive of him, evolving himself. And people say, how can the Buddha leave his wife and go away? He didn't leave his wife, he left his companion of many, many lifetimes, who also became a Buddha in his lifetime. So it was a movement of particles. So this is what I'm saying. When you start looking at the world of particles, you get to understanding the potential of the occult objects. The same way you have a story of Nostradamus. A young boy was passing, he called him near and he picked up his robe, the boy's robe that he was wearing, and he kissed it. So people said, by then Nostradamus was very well known. Why are you kissing the robe of a dirty urchin on the robe? He said, no, I'm not kissing the urchin's robe. I am kissing the robe of the future Pope. That boy then later on became the Pope, one of the popes. So that when you move out of this physical body identification and you move into the second, you have a tremendous amount of love flowing through you, but you know that this is not from you, it's from somewhere else that this comes, and you realize. So, let me read you one last poem and then I can talk about something else. Rumi says when he lost his master, who took the place of the divine beloved for him until he found the divine beloved within himself. He says, your love has left me exhausted. I have been worn out, ruined on your path. I can neither sleep during the day nor sleep at night. Your love has turned me into my own enemy. This is a sort of poetry that all mystics write along the way, whether it's a man or a woman, it could be Mirabai, it could be Andal, it could be St. John of the Cross, St. Teresa of Avila. They all go through this phase. Why should I seek? He says to himself. I'm the same as he. His essence speaks through me. I've been looking for myself and I found myself in Shams, Shamsi Tabrizi. And on his tomb, they had written, when we are dead, on his tomb, Rumi's tomb, which he left, when we are dead, seek not our tomb in the earth, find it in the hearts of men. And one of his, what he wrote was, resist wearing the cloak of love as long as you can. I'm saying it again, listen. Resist wearing the cloak of love as long as you can. But once you wear it, don't yell, don't cry about every trouble. Once you wear it, don't yell, don't cry about every trouble. Keep silent. Difficulties come, just keep silent. Don't say, oh, I wish I hadn't got on. Even burning in love's dress, at the end, comfort and kindness will arrive for you. So remember, today is also the Sufi class is over. I mean, from the point of talking in class satsang, but we have to live that life wherever we go and whatever we go and whatever we do. And more than anything, remember these stories and remember what every spiritual tradition is telling you. That is why Jesus says, I have not come to break, I've come to build. No, Prophet says the same thing, I've come to put back what has been lost. And Krishna also says the Sanatana Dharma, which was there, I've come back to put it together to establish Dharma. So again and again and again and again, you will find people who will come and we will all be called to the cross, remember. And what do we do when we have a difficulty? We are going to the cross. But what do we say? Oh, please relieve my stress. I'm so stressed out, I can't. Can you give me a good time? Somebody will tell you, why don't you go for a movie? Why don't you have a break? Why don't you go to the resort? Because we don't want that stress. That's a whole problem. We don't want that stress because we think we are entitled to something better. But think of what we are entitled to. We are entitled to divinity, and you don't get it easy like that. So, kicking and screaming, we go here and there. So, you think of it, when Jesus knew that he had that love in him to the extent that when he was crucified, he says, "Forgive them, they know not what they do." How many of us can say, we could say that even if we get a flu given to us, say COVID, you go to the mall, you know somebody who has flu, and you pick up the COVID, come home, and then you will say, you will curse that woman or man who was there wounded, who handed it to you. You don't say, poor thing, they don't know. Nobody having COVID is coming to put it on you. So when you hear all this, you just think about it. Today is Easter, the day he has risen. And what is the meaning? Outside damage or outside hurt will give you pain because it's to your body. But when a person is hurt from inside, and in a way, Jesus was hurt from inside when he saw all his disciples running away, Judas betraying him. When something is hurt from inside, then the growth happens. For example, you try to, yesterday I was reading something in the newspaper, someone said you try to break an egg from outside and the whatever is inside spills out. But when the chicken grows inside and breaks it from inside, breaks the cage and comes out, it becomes a bird that can fly. So when you have difficulties and problems in life, don't think it is bad. Remember that it is God knocking on your door and saying, you are mine and I have the right to give you the pain because I am facing it through you. You are not facing it. Now tell me, you listen to all this. Was Jesus Christian? Was Meera Hindu? Was Muhammad a Muslim? They are all children of God, right? Not just them, everybody, every being is a child of God, including that little, what do you call it? The eggplant on the plant, the tree that is giving you fruits and flowers. Everything is a child of the divine because there is nothing that has not come through creation. And that is what we have to remember. And if he can do this tremendous weaving like a tapestry of the universes when nothing goes out of step, then why should we be afraid of anything? If you have the truth, my guru used to say, never be afraid. If you have the truth in you, stand fearless, nothing can defeat you. So today you'll see me, I'm wearing one geru, one white shawl with a red end, and then I'm wearing a green. There is a light burning on the side of me, and I'm telling myself today that I am Christian, I am Muslim, I am Hindu, I am Zoroastrian. Everything is in me, but beyond everything, I am the Atma which belongs to God. And I want you to remember it is true for you also, and for everyone in the universe. We all have different dresses, different prayers, different places of prayer, different values. They are all relative, but there is one value that is always been there, is there now, will always be there. That is the truth. And when you follow the dharma of the truth, then the divine lives in you, and the divine is Christian, Muslim, Hindu, and everything else, and is beyond that also. So I'll end this with what Swami Satyananda said to one of his disciples who is on this talk here, listening to it, I know. And when he asked he asked Swamiji about his difficulty or what other people call the dissonance between religion and spirituality. Swamiji said, God made man, man made religion. So I'll stop with that. We'll go on to a music. Shivani.
I'll start the video, but I have to stop the YouTube screening. So I apologize for that.
No, no problem. Let's chant. Let's chant Om, offering whatever we have received today due to the sacrifice made by many of our forefathers and people who are here today, and people who are to come, who will keep the dharma, the righteousness of the divine alive in spite of all the disharmony in the universes. And let each Omkar that we say go to the divine so that he may give that love to people who are impoverished. Those who wish to say Om can say Om. Those who wish to say Amen can say Amen. Those who wish to say Amen can say Amen. It's the same thing. It's just that vibration and that tone. So offering up everything to the divine, breathing in. Om. Om. Hari Om Tat Sat. Keep the divine in your heart, not in your mind, because mind will ask questions and doubts and logic. Keep it in your heart and let God walk with you with blessings of love. Hari Om Tat Sat.